So everybody welcome. Can I see a show of hands for anybody who has downloaded the the admin views from Tableau Server in the past and tried to hack them? Thank you, please stop that. Can I get a show of hands for anyone who is connected directly to the Postgres database in Tableau Server? Stop. And has anyone out there, written any amount of custom SQL against that database? Everyone, please, please just stop. Because you're all doing it the hard way. And I'm going to save you a crazy amount of time over the next 45 minutes. It's the kind of crazy time savings that makes people want to, I don't know, rate a session 5 stars or just throwing ideas out there. So I'm going to talk about a tool that should help. I'll do a quick demo, tell you some more details about it. We'll do some Q&A at the end, okay? All right. So that's the title slide. Who am I and why should you listen to me anyway? My name is Matt Coles. I've been with Tableau for 7 years. Initially, I was hired to do ETL from Salesforce into SQL Server so we could analyze Salesforce data in Tableau. We've come full circle at that point, it looks like. I really liked working with Tableau Server and not so much with SQL Server, no shade to Microsoft. So I became the Tableau Server admin for all of Tableau. So our internal deployment of Tableau, just administrating Tableau Server for everyone. From there, I moved into a more customer-facing role. I'm doing some admin stuff still, but mostly I'm talking to customers like yourselves about how we run Tableau Server internally at Tableau. So that's me. And just to add a little a few data points behind that experience, this is a chart of our user growth since I was hired at Tableau until present day-ish. We went from 300 users to about 6,000. And somehow I still have a job, so I'm doing something right, I guess. So why are you here? Well, if it's that you're an admin like myself, it's likely that you have questions about Tableau Server. You want to know what's going on, how do we scale it, how is it running, how is it performing, what are people doing with it? And it turns out you're not the only one who has questions. So we have analysts who are wondering if anyone is looking at their dashboards that they've worked so hard to create for the enterprise. Admins like you and me are wondering how we can scale. Do we need to buy new hardware to keep up with the demand? Viewers want to know if they're getting the best possible experience with Tableau Server. And finally, people who are paying money for Tableau licenses want to know if they're getting their money's worth out of them. So everybody has a lot of questions that they're trying to answer. It's not just us. The problem is Tableau Server can be a bit of a black box when it comes to getting data out. So you can use the admin views that come with Tableau Server, but a lot of questions for large enterprises just become unanswerable that they need answered. You really need the flexibility at that level of deployment to be able to ask specific questions that are specific to your deployment and its particulars. So let's talk about where data ends up in Tableau Server. This is how I think about the universe of data in Tableau Server. Just a visual guide here. So first point of interest is that Tableau Server doesn't run by itself. It runs on physical or virtual machines of some kind. And so those machines are creating their own data points that are useful to admins, CPU utilization, memory usage, disk space, all those good metrics. So that's one source of data. Within Tableau Server, the application itself, we have kind of two different kinds of data that I like to think about. One is content focused, so it's the artifacts that users are actually creating and publishing up to Tableau Server. So this would be workbooks, data sources, views, and now flows as well with Prep Conductor. And there's the activity data set. So there's usually someone doing something to some piece of content, and there's a timestamp associated with it. So that's what I think about as being the two different kinds of data we're dealing with. Now, as for where that data ends up, we have three choices these days. The first is good old logs, right? Tableau Server's processes dump out text logs to tell you what they're doing. Those tend to be very large, not consistently structured, very hard to get answers out of. There is new in 2019.3, the data catalog, which is stored in a GraphQL database. It is affiliated with the Postgres server, but it is its own beast. Not necessarily easy to get data out of into Tableau, but it is there. I'm a big data catalog fan, by the way. And then finally, there's the repository database. This is a PostgreSQL database that powers Tableau Server, hosts metadata about what's going on with it. And so the data gets stored from these two different categories, generally speaking, according to the arrows that I drew up there. So a lot of the content information gets written to the repository and the catalog. A lot of the activity is split between logs and the repository as well. Now, as far as getting at that data and analyzing it, there's a lot of solutions that are out there. And this is by no means comprehensive, as any experienced server admin knows. I'm leaving a lot off, and I'm not throwing shade at anybody, I promise. I just didn't want to talk about them all. So an example would be Splunk. It's great for indexing log files and making sense out of those, bringing some structure to that madness. New Relic is an application monitoring software. It tries to apply some benchmarks to application performance. On the Tableau side, we have things like LogShark. I didn't list Tabmon, but that's a great one too. That'll help analyze log data. And also in 2019.3, you saw devs on stage. My friend Sarah Ranchler just presented the resource monitoring tool that comes as a part of the server management add-on. That'll actually take data from your host machines and the repository database and the logs and try to synthesize it into something meaningful for admins. So also something to check out. But I'm not here to talk about any of that stuff today. I'm here to talk about the solution that I think is the quickest, easiest, fastest time to value that you can get to answer questions about what's happening in Tableau Server. And it's a tool called the Tableau Server Insights data sources. And what these are is a set of data sources written in Tableau that talk directly to the repository server on Tableau Server. And so I'm going to talk about more about that in a second, but first, let's talk about the Tableau Server repository database some more. And to give you an example of the challenges you're going to face if you try to go in there alone, I want to tell you a cautionary tale about a simple server admin. It's a tale of databases and extracts, failure, and unbridled enthusiasm. Once upon a time, there was a simple server admin, some might say a cockeyed optimist. He had one goal and one goal only, and that was, before end of quarter, busyness hit, to talk to any user who had extracts running too frequently. And he thought, this is easy. I'm going to take this background task view that Tableau's given me, and I'm going to just fill in the tooltip and add the name of the person who owns that piece of content, whether it's a workbook or a data source, and I'll just talk to them. Easy enough, right? So, as any good server admin did, he read the documentation and saw that in order to access Postgres, he needed to open it up first. He ran a TSM command to access that data. Picked the read-only user because that's the only one that really makes sense. The Tableau user doesn't really have access to enough to answer meaningful questions. And naturally, had to restart Tableau Server because that's what you do. Everything was good so far. He went to Tableau Desktop, his analytics tool of choice for talking to the repository database. It's just Postgres after all, right? How hard could it be? Put in his login credentials, and all of a sudden was assaulted by tables on the left, on the right, from the outer and the inner. Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. Undaunted, our hero dove into the data, joined, synthesized, unioned his way out of the tabular jungle until finally he emerged from the cycle of data analysis, wiped the sweat from his brow, and beheld the solution to all the answers about background jobs he could ever ask. 2 pages of custom SQL. He turned to his colleagues excitedly and said, "Guys, I figured it out, just in time for end of quarter." They looked back at him in confusion. "Matt, end of quarter was 2 months ago." I was the admin in that story. Let me tell you, over those 2 months, I left a lot of myself behind in that database. I saw data structures no analyst should ever be confronted with. I had to do things should never be mentioned in polite company to get that data. And I vowed that day never to let anyone else suffer as I had done. So, if you feel like you want to get into that database, let me tell you, you've been warned. And if you do, may God have mercy on your soul. So just stop. So let's talk about a better way. The set of data sources that I talked about earlier, the Tableau Server Insights data sources, there are 6 of them. I'm going to talk briefly about each one. and what kinds of questions you can answer with it. So first we have TS content. This is a general data source that helps you understand what has been published to Tableau Server, along with some aggregate usage metrics for it. TS users is great because it tells you every user that's on Tableau Server with some aggregate activity for that user and what they own, along with their license role. So if you want to ask questions about whether someone's using a license effectively in the role that they've been given, if they're a creator, are they creating? We can answer questions with this data source. TS events is your classic audit data source. So who did what to what thing when? It's great for high-level audits. TS data connections, you can kind of think of this as a mapping between data servers, published data sources, and workbooks. So it's almost like a high-level data catalog if you want to think about it that way. TS background tests, the one I just talked about. Those 2 pages of custom SQL. You don't have to write that because this is already here. All your extracts, subscriptions, alerts, all that stuff is in there. If you want to monitor capacity on each host throughout the day, use this data source for that. And finally, TS web requests, which is another auditing, eventing type data source. Similar to TS events in some ways, but really it's focused on viz level interaction with your users. So what viz are they rendering? How fast did it take? How long did it take to render? Did they select marks? Are they filtering? Some of those metrics end up there. So you might ask at this point, why, if you spend all this time in Postgres and you're trying to save us pain, why don't you just build the admin views for us? I mean, wouldn't that make more sense? And there's 3 reasons, really. First is, in order to create a cool-looking viz, you have to build additional calcs. And I didn't want to sully up the data source purity with a bunch of weird extra calcs that don't add analytical value aside from the admin views themselves. Second of all, it's a lot of work to maintain those things already, and adding vizzes on top of that is going to make it so that I don't maintain any of it, really. So that seemed like a win. Also, I am not good at making dashboards, so I trust that you guys have the talent in yourselves or with other people in your organization to build cool dashboards, and we'll show some examples of what other people have built that is far superior to what I have built later on. So, let's walk through a couple common features. I've tried to follow as many best practices as possible with these data sources. One of them you'll notice right off the bat is that we have folders. Yes, foldered fields. So when you have a data source that has lots of fields in it, it makes it so much easier to navigate if you folder it and group those logically. A couple of conventions we're using here are the word item refers to publishable content on Tableau Server. So this is either a view, a workbook, a data source, or a flow. That's something you can see across the data sources. We're trying to be fairly consistent with the conventions. So anything relating to an item universally will be in this folder. If you look down below, you see other folders that are specific to different kinds of content, and those contain fields that are particular to just that content. The concept of an owner, so the owner for a piece of content on Tableau Server will always show up here, their username, their email, their friendly name, all that good stuff. We also put in a bunch of hyperlink calculations so that if you want to link out to Tableau Server, to a particular view or to a particular data source, you can easily generate a URL action in your dashboard using these pre-built calculations. You don't have to build that yourself. Row level security. This is a really important one. So within this folder, we have a field called user filter. And within that, if you edit that calc, you'll see we have a lot of different options for row level security. So we'll talk more about that use case in a little bit, but generally speaking, these data sources are built to share. They're not built to keep all that data to yourself as the admin. You'll have your own purpose for it, but your users really want this data too. And so being able to share it safely with them is a huge plus, and we give you various levels of access that you can define in that row level security to make sure the right people have the right access. Project leaders can see things in their projects. Normal publishers can see stuff related to their content, and everyone can see activity that they perform on Tableau Server. Last but not least, we've actually commented all the fields. So if you hover over them, you'll get a tooltip telling you exactly what it is and what it does to the best of our knowledge. Very underrated feature in Tableau. Definitely recommend using that yourself in any published data source that you use. All right, so let's walk through a quick demo. And so using the use case that I was talking about earlier about sharing data with your users, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to build a dashboard for them so they can see their own content? At a high level, what's going on with it? So we're going to build 3 sheets and we'll put them in one dashboard. The first is around extract refreshes, so they can see how their own extract refreshes are doing and maybe don't bug you about it. Popular views, so show the views that they've published that are the most popular, ranked, top 10, and then show how they've been adopted over time by other people in the organization. So let's use these data sources really quickly and see how that works. Uh-oh, you can't see anything, can you? Let's see if we can fix that. There we go. All right, good. So this is the problem with headphones. No one's going to yell at me about that. All right, so before I get started, I will let you know that I cheated a little bit. I predefined a calculation called isMyContent. So this is just saying, is the owner username for this content the username function in the calculation? So is the viewer of this dashboard the person who owns the content? That's filtered to true. So it's already set up with the user filter specific to the content owner. So when I look at extract data, I have 3 dates here in the dates folder. The first is the created at, and that is when it was enqueued. So when did the task when was it scheduled to run? The next is started at, so when did we actually start working on that data, that refresh with Tableau Server? And the completed at, which is naturally is when it finished. So if you're interested in analyzing the gap between the delay in your backgrounders, you simply do a diff between the created at and the started at, and that tells you the amount of time that you're just wasting doing nothing. So let's grab the started at field. Oh, one more thing, we have local times, and all the dates are stored in UTC in Postgres, and so these fields that have local are in the local time, and the way you change the time zone is with this parameter here. So you can set that time zone to however you want, and it will update. And I'm hoping to use dynamic parameters to make this automatically changing for DST as well someday. Hopefully that'll work. We'll see. All right, so let's take the started at and local time and just throw it out on columns. So this is a history of all the extract refreshes over the recent past. Let's grab the item name, so the name of the content. This is the friendly username, the friendly name that would be shown to users on Tableau Server. And I'll note at this point that none of this data is real. Well, the data is real, it's just that the names of the content is not. I actually downloaded a database from goodreads.com of book titles and publishers and authors. So if you see anything weird in here, it's not me, it's them. If you get offended, email Goodreads. Okay, so we have a nice little Gantt chart here. Let's put the duration on the size so that we can see how long all these extracts took. Well, in Tableau, Gantt charts are calculated in days. So we already have a calculation for job duration in days. We can add to the size. And now you can see how long all those extracts took to run. Now, I also want to see if they failed or succeeded. So we have another field for that down in the task folder called job status. So if I put that on color, immediately I can see the failures and the successes. Red being failed, blue being success. Great. Let's go a step further and put some shapes on there too. So the stock admin view in Tableau Server actually has X's for failures and filled circles for success. So we're going to build that really quick just because we can do better, right? Let's show them up a little bit. I'm going to grab completed at, because that's where our marks are going to show up. That creates a separate sheet, a separate pane here. I'm going to switch the mark type into shape and put the job status on shape as well. So now immediately we have X's and circles for failures and successes respectively. And I'm going to take this off size just because we don't care about size for that one. Put them on a dual axis. And everything's great, except we just need to synchronize the axis to make sure all the marks align. And now we have a background task view for extracts for our users. All right, let's move on to popular views. All right, so we're going to use TS content for this. So again, this is a data source that exposes everything that's been published to Tableau Server, along with some aggregate usage metrics. So this is very simple. to do, all we need to do is grab the name of the item, throw it on the rows shelf. I had to make this font bigger so it's a little bit squished. All right, and now we just need to make sure they're actually views and not workbooks or data sources or anything like that. So we'll grab the type, throw it up there, pick just the views. All right, so there's all the views that I own. And now when I go down to the measures, you can see we've got a lot of access count fields down here. So what we're looking at is how many people have accessed those over what period of time. So this is aggregate. It's not going to show you the actual people yet. We're not to that point. So we have access count all days, 10 days, various time ranges. That's just the raw number of times anyone accessed it. And then we have a unique count of the users who accessed it, so you can see the unique users over that same period of time. Let's grab the unique users over the last 30 days. We'll make a quick bar chart here, sort by popularity, and then we're just going to put a top 10 filter on here. So we can see the top 10, and this happens a lot. We just need to make sure that this filter is added to the context so it takes precedence over the top 10 filter, and now we have the top 10 most popular views by the unique users accessing those views that I own. Great. And now let's put a hyperlink on it just so you can click and go to that view on Tableau Server really easily. To do that, I just go up to hyperlinks. And I'm just there's various options here, right? I can download that item. I can look at the details page. I can look at the schedules if I want to make it a little quicker. I'm just going to grab the default one. That's going to default to the view itself, render it in Tableau Server. I just need it on the dashboard somewhere so I can add that into my action. And so here's the action for it. It just says go to view, and then the URL I'm going to is the hyperlink. And when I click on this, I have a little link that will take me right to that view on Tableau Server. I'm going to add one more field to this sheet because I need it for an action I'm going to show you in a second with the other dashboard component. And that's the LUID. So this is a unique identifier in Tableau Server for every item that's published. It's supposed to technically only be unique within a site, so technically I should be filtering this by site too, but who has the time? This is a demo at TC, so we're not going to do that. All right, so last one is view adoption. So how many people are looking at this over time? For that, we're going to use TS events, because if we want to break it down by a day or week or whatever, that stuff is going to live in our auditing data source TS events. And the name of the event is going to be access view. So we're actually looking for the event name that shows us that someone has accessed that view. And we're going to filter to that. We're going to put the date of the access event. Where did I put that? So the event date in local time again. And this is actually storing 180 days by default in Tableau Server, so we're just going to break it down by the weekly level instead of showing something more granular. And then again, we're going to use that same metric, count of distinct people who are looking at this viz. So this just shows the unique number of users who did a thing. And that's the overall view adoption for all the views that I own. And now I just need to link that together with the other sheet. So I'm going to make LUID part of the detail of this viz by putting it on color. And so now that's all my vizes broken out. So let's see what the dashboard looks like. And there it is. We have a high-level overview of content that we can give to any user on Tableau. It'll automatically filter to just their content, hopefully save admins a bit of grief, and really make users happy. And then if I click any of these marks here, I can actually filter the view adoption, compare two views to each other, et cetera, whatever you want to do. And you can go and add all you want to this based on all the fields that we have in any of those data sources to give your users what they need. All right, that was the demo. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through just a few more use cases internally at Tableau that we've built over the years. This is one for the background tasks again. It's not as fancy as the one I just showed you, actually. One thing I wanted to point out is how useful it is to orient your background task views this way, with every item being a horizontal line. Because when things fail, common to a database server, for example, you see a big red line going vertically through it. And it's a great visual indicator of when you have a comprehensive problem that's not necessarily Tableau Server's fault. So it's really helpful in triangulating and finding problems that can alleviate pressure on yourself as an admin. Here's a viz that we built just for looking at the ratio of how often something is being used versus how often its extract is refreshing and how long it's taking comprehensively across a week or so to refresh. And so if we see one person accessing a viz and the viz, the extract behind that workbook is being refreshed, every hour, that's not really a great ratio for business value, I would say. And so we want to talk to that person and have them scale it back, or maybe, a lot of times people publish things up and set it to refresh and they forget about it. It gets retired or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, we need to see that stuff as admins. That's our server. So very useful. Here's an example of a viz I built against Tableau Server performance. So views rendering for users over time, total traffic displayed in the gray above, orange marks representing when requests are overly slow based on a ratio of standard deviations above the mean of what they had done the previous week for that viz. So really helpful to have some performance monitoring that comes directly out of Postgres. As imperfect as it may be, I found it very useful. We had a hackathon a couple weeks ago in which one of the devs said, hey, can I see who's been looking at using mobile devices on Tableau Server internally? And I said, yeah, I've got that data. Go check it out. So he built a viz based on the TS web request data source, filtered it to just mobile clients, and looked at overall traffic above and then the duration on the below shelf. He also built this one that shows the most prolific users of mobile on Tableau Server, and Ed Bahrain won. In case you know him, congratulate him. We have some criteria around published data sources that are certified. So we don't let anything get certified. We want to know if someone has certified something that doesn't fall into compliance with our policies. So we have a few policies defined here in this dashboard. And when something's wrong with it, we get an email. And then we can talk to that person and say, hey, can you please add a description? Or can you please make sure it's not in a test folder? Because this is a certified data source, right? You really want to support this thing. So very useful having that conversation and giving users direct visibility into it. We have this embedded on our wiki, actually, for published data source certification process. Our finance team actually built this one, and it shows the number of data sources on Tableau Server that they're supporting over time. And so this is a great viz if you need more resources on your team and you need to justify the headcount. Just be like, hey, look, we're doing a lot, and it's not getting less. We're doing more and more. That same team built this dashboard that shows the same data sources, but their utilization, min and max, so they can get a sense for how popular the content is that they've built. Another team wanted to see adoption of a particular dashboard they had written. So using the TS events data source, they're able to see every individual who accessed it. And they actually blended in some org chart data from another data source so they could see what their title was as well. It's nice to know if someone like, I don't know, Adam Silipsky is looking at your viz. Maybe you should make it faster, And finally, this is one that we built just internally in our team to see what teams were using Tableau the most or the least at Tableau. One of our core values is we use our own products, and we wanted to know, like, are we really doing that? And if not, where are we not doing that? And so each of these marks is a team, with the size being the number of people on the team. It's not meant to be a wall of shame, but I am proud to say that our team is first, so yes. All right, a little bit more technical information for you guys. I put this chart together. I'm not going to tell you all of this stuff, so take your pictures. This is a good one to take pictures of if you can't wait for the slides to come out later. But it's basically the strategy that I suggest you use for extracting or keeping live each of these data sources. And also, it tells you about the retention on the data that's underlying each of these data sources from Tableau Server. So, for example, TS Events has 180 days by default that's kept in Tableau Server. Background tasks is 30, and the TS Web Request one is only 7. And I put the parameters on there in the configs that you can change to extend those periods if you want. I don't have a lot of guidance to give you on whether you should do that or not. I would say if you're going to do something like that, don't go crazy. Like, do it incrementally. So, doubling would probably be a little excessive for things like TS events. The one that I guess I would warn you about the most is the TS web request, because that data is very wide and verbose text-wise, and so it will take up a lot of space if you increase the duration of the retention period. So you might want another strategy like incremental extracts, or maybe dumping output to prep every once in a while into text files or something like that with prep. I want to talk a little bit more about auditing, because I see that question come up a lot on the forums. People want to do audits. Who downloaded this viz, who exported the data. The strategy for exporting, getting that audit information comprehensively really has to involve two data sources, and that's both the TS events data source and TS web requests. You can't get everything without both. So TS events, it's great for general audit stuff. It doesn't pull everything though. It's good for logins. It'll show you who logged in, logged out, who's publishing content to Tableau Server, accessing a data source. It doesn't track guest user access though, so that's one gap in this data source. TS web requests is more focused on viz interaction, so when you have someone that's logged in and looking at a viz, you're going to get more data about that from here. It does have export information, so if they export that viz to PDF, to CSV, to image, you'll get that here. Or the underlying data, if they're accessing underlying data, it'll show that as well. It also has some information on failed requests. So if you want to look for failures in Tableau Server, that's going to be here, and it's not going to show up in TS events, because TS events only shows you successes. Web edits are a great one. It's nice to know who's web editing, because that actually corresponds to the Explorer license. So if you want to know what users are doing web edits a lot, and maybe you want to give them a creator license, this could be a good way to find those folks. And finally, Ask Data, well, not finally, but Ask Data usage also shows up here, so you're not going to get that in TS web requests. It will not tell you the questions people are asking, but it will tell you who's using it on what data source. And like I showed earlier, it's a great data source for performance of vizzes. Yeah, TS events, I wish it had it in there. It doesn't. That historical events table that is backing it just doesn't have performance data in it, unfortunately. So this is your go-to for viz load performance out of Postgres. And like I said, the user agent, so if you want to know who's looking at mobile device or who's using, I don't know, Python to talk to your server, like that stuff is going to show up in there as well as their IP address. So you can actually track it down to a host machine or an IP address of interest. All right, and a few caveats as well. Things that these data sources can't do that I wish they could, but it's just not in Postgres, so they can't. Permissions actually is in Postgres, but we can't do it yet because it's just been challenging. But it is #1 on our request list, so we will be doing something with it soon. We're just not quite there yet. Data catalog, if you're going to do lineage stuff that's any lower than server level, if you want to go down to databases, table names, column names, that's a catalog request. Use catalog for that. You will not get that out of TS data connections. Also, it's missing connection information for flows because that was really complex. I tried hard. I couldn't get it in there. Sorry. Host performance metrics, CPU utilization, all that good stuff that comes from the hosts, can't get out of Postgres. You can get disk space based on that viz that Tableau deployed with the stock admin views that shows you disk space remaining. So you could get that from Postgres, but we don't have anything in the data sources for that at this point. And then another thing I see come up on the forums is people trying to reconcile audit information with the sort of broad metrics of usage in Tableau Server, and they just never quite line up. And that's because they're calculated somewhat differently, and the guest user access can throw things off as well. So that's kind of a losing battle. Don't necessarily try to do that. And finally, you're not going to get perf recording data out of this. You're not going to see the queries that were slow on the viz. You're not going to get anything more than high-level performance for how long the background task took to run or how long the viz took to run. All right, so a little bit about the future. 2019.4, we need to update them for that, so that's first on the list. TS permissions, we need to get something in there for that, clearly. That's in progress. We'd like to make these optimized for Ask Data. So when Ask Data allows you to define synonyms and other traits that make it easy to ask questions of, we want to give people the experience where they can just ask the data sources directly. And farther off in the distance, we're excited about the data model, the noodle stuff you guys saw at the devs on stage. We're really excited to consolidate a lot of data sources. I think we did some testing, and we could probably consolidate 3 into 1. And ask a lot more questions of the same data source, and probably faster as well. Okay, this is where you get out your phone again and take pictures, if you're the picture-taking type. I'm going to go through some resources. So where do you get it? This is where you get it. It is now on GitHub. Everyone take the pictures. It's on GitHub. It used to be on the Tableau Server community. That post got way too long, way too long. Toby Erickson yelled at me. He's like, you can't have this here anymore. I was like, okay, fine. We'll put it on GitHub. So it's there now. That's the official version. We have a compatibility matrix on there, so you can see if I'm running version 2019.3 of server, which one do I get? It'll give you a link directly to each of the data sources that you need and the TWIB that you need to download to use it. As far as getting help with them goes, please continue to ask questions on the server admin forums. We will monitor them, and we're happy to answer questions there. If you are the technical type and you find an actual bug, or you have you want to contribute in some way, you can interact with us on GitHub as well. But for general stuff, we like to keep it a community thing, so keep it on the community. All right, finally, last slide, homework. This is your homework. It's TC, it's busy, everyone's overstimulated, there's a lot going on, you have a million sessions and a million notes. So this is your homework for this session. Stop connecting to Postgres. Stop it. That's easy, right? No problem. Second of all, download these data sources and just pick one of them to start if you want, connect it to Postgres, and start playing with it. Lastly, build a viz and share it with anybody else in your organization. It doesn't have to be a straight up user, it could just be another admin, anybody else, your boss, show how great you are, build something and share it. That's all. It's easy. It's fun. It's fun. Do this. Okay, finally, I do read every single review I get. Forget the 5-star thing. I want to hear honest feedback. I'll either be happy or I'll improve. So be honest about it. But please fill it out. I really appreciate it. A couple other sessions. Again, if you want to be a phone picture taker and don't have these on your list already, there's 2 sessions tomorrow that are happening that I recommend you check out as well. They should be really helpful to any server admin looking to answer questions or automate with Tableau Server. Finally, thank you, and we'll do Q&A now. If you guys want to come up to the microphone, we have a few minutes for that.